If you've been enjoying R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all platforms or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast. Today's guest is Felix Levine, a fellow podcast host. He's the host of the Where's This Going podcast. He's also the CEO of Lynx, and I'm really excited to learn more about that platform that you're building. Before we do, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself further than what I just outlined there. There's a lot more that goes into an individual than the titles that you see on a LinkedIn or social media post. So I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself to my audience.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. That was a pretty good introduction. Yes, those are my two little babies at the moment. Um, I've spent almost 4 years now in the podcast world, and coming up on a year, really focusing on the SaaS world. So, learning a lot. Every day is there's so many different things that happen when you start crossing over into tech and just I think entrepreneurship in general. And I think this year is going to be big for us at Lynx, and then on a personal level, hopefully, really continuing to grow. So I actually just finished this book called Maximum Momentum, where it says that your best days are ahead. So that's really where I'm at right now, is focusing on how I can continue to create momentum for myself and the projects that I'm a part of, and really hoping that those best days are ahead.
I love it. Yeah, I know they are. I fully subscribe to that as well. To that end, I mean, you talked about trying to grow the businesses and grow yourself personally. Let's start with the fun stuff. What else do you do? Obviously, you read, but what else do you do for personal growth? And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you two? Because I think we're probably in the same boat.
I turned 24 in 6 days.
Okay. Well, happy almost birthday. And
How
I
old are
mean, I
you?
feel like I'm 26, turning 7 in about a month.
Are you an Aquarius as well?
The 17th of February. I think that's technically Aquarius.
It's okay. I just learned about that recently too. I
Yeah, I mean, look, as a fellow 20-something-year-old guy, what are you doing for personal growth? There's so much to do in my world, at least. I'd love to hear how you're tackling
yeah.
that beast.
I mean, so in terms of hobbies, I mean, reading. I'm really trying to get into. My future mother-in-law just got me a Kindle for Christmas, so I've been really trying to tackle that, and I realized that every single smart person I know reads, and they read a fair bit. So if I want to get into that category, I think it's a good time to really get to it. So that's one of my New Year's resolutions, if you will. It's good timing there. I actually kind of proud. It's been like what 16 days, and I've read a book and a half, which is not bad. It's pretty decent. So you know what? Right now, that one's looking good. But no, I really love, to answer your question. Obviously, work right now is taking up a lot of my time. I mean, really all of my time. I think, I try to, another something I want to work on more is taking care of myself. So whether it's the reading, the eating well, working out. I played tennis for 10 years, so I love tennis as well. So right now, it's mostly just trying to find a little bit of actually, I don't really believe that much in the work-life balance. Like, I think when you're obsessed with something, there's no way that you can not think about it all the time. And I do have a hard time relaxing, I'll be honest. So, everything entrepreneurial though gets me going. Um, there's so many different businesses that I want to be a part of one day, and right now I have my main two babies that I'm focusing on, and so yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of a shtick about me and what goes on through my mind. As you can see, I'm fairly scatterbrained at times, thinking about a lot of things at once, but it's exciting.
To give the audience a little bit of perspective here, we're recording at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday after a long holiday weekend. So give us a little bit of, or cut us a little bit of slack if we're, to Felix's point, a little bit scrambled around. To that end, you mentioned tennis. What are your thoughts on the pickleball tennis debate? I know it's a little bit past us right now because we're in the heat of winter, but what are you thinking about that right now?
Crazy enough, so I played competitive tennis for 10 years, so big tennis guy, but I've never played padel. Some people call it paddle. I don't know which one, whatever you prefer, or pickleball for that matter. I hear that like it's pretty quick and easy to pick up on if if you know how to play tennis. What I'm mostly sad about is that I missed out being like an early investor into something that went nuts in the pickleball space. So I missed the boat there, but I definitely want to get my hands on both of those rackets. They both seem like really fun sports, honestly. I'm a big proponent of racket sports. I think that they're so good at every level, cardio and socially speaking, and it's some of those. It's one of those sports you can play deep into your life, so that's also great. So I'm always going to be pro tennis, but God bless everybody that's having a great time with pickleball.
Amen. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Those life sports. I mean, it's interesting seeing some of the big national insurers here in the U.S. were claiming, like United Healthcare claimed pickleball, ended up leading to a rise in claims. I think it was in the third quarter because people were getting injured playing pickleball, which is,
That's
a
so
negative
funny.
thing
It's
people
probably
can
a lot of
post.
old people.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So,
Damn.
at least people are active to your point.
Hey, hopefully it's not casualties, mostly, just like little nicks and bruises. But to be fair, if you're calling your insurer, it's probably not just a nick and bruise. So, I don't know. But I do know it's great for older people, and obviously stuff like that's gonna happen. But if you're in your mid 50s or 60s, like go try it. And honestly, I think it's less strenuous than tennis and a little bit easier on the knees and the articulation. So hey, I'll try it.
Love it. Now here's going to be my segue from, tennis and paddle and pickleball to Felix. So you are based in Brooklyn, grew up in Brooklyn from my research. When I was in New York, I guess I was there probably last a few months ago for work. And, me and my friends were looking at renting out a pickleball court to go and play for a bit. And there was courts at Central Park. I think it was like $200 an hour for a court. So that said,
Jesus Christ.
the pickleball trend and paddle trend in New York is definitely alive and well, and I know it is in many other cities too. But with that, you're a Brooklyn guy. Get me up to speed on Felix. I know you're also a French American as well. Tell me a little bit more. What context do I need to know about you, and what does the audience need to know about you to help us understand your two babies today?
Man, I really appreciate the homework. I think it's one of those things that I try to do as well for my guests. So, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. My mom is French, so she came to the United States a couple years before I was born. And she still has her thick French accent the same way she did right off the plane when she first got here. I was going to say the boat, but I don't think people come to the United States by boat these days. And so I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Still live there. Obviously, spend a lot of time now, more in Manhattan with my girlfriend. But I'm Brooklyn through and through. I went to middle school in Brooklyn. I actually then went to high school in the city, so that was a long commute. And it's just, I love it because I think it's very close to the city. Uh, I think it's a better place to raise a family, to be honest. I think now it was funny because the neighborhood I grew up in back in the day was not great, like in the early 2000s. I grew up in like Gowanus Park Slope, and then in the last 15 years has absolutely become really one of the nicest and really safest and loveliest places to be. So I'm very grateful for that. And I the French is there in me as well. I've gone there every year, luckily, since I was born, basically, because my mom, we have a lot of family friends and family, and I think that definitely played into who I am today, 100%. Speak fluent French, which is awesome, and I'm grateful to my mom for that. So it's the French Brooklyn dichotomy is interesting, but I'm blessed to have both.
Very interesting. Yeah, to your point, there's for someone with dark features like yourself, they're probably not the first guest. Probably isn't French American being in Brooklyn.
Exactly. I also think it's funny because there's a lot of things that I take into who I am from French culture, and I try to be warm. I think it's a culture centered around love. So which is kind of funny, I guess, because Brooklyn is all like the history of it is like Italian mob, and which also funny enough I have funny stories about as well. So um I don't know. I'm very happy to be who I am.
So you grew up in Brooklyn, went to school in the city. You went to school out in California, then went up to Boston. Walk me through that. Get us up to speed there.
Yeah, so my freshman year of college, I went to UC Santa Barbara, which is a lovely school. I mean, a really great school. And days into it, I was like, fuck this, I'm out. Not because it's not a great school or not a nice place. It's actually literally the most beautiful place in the country, in my opinion. But like for a 5-day vacation, not to go to school there for 4 years. I think the mentality of the people there, although very, very, very nice, actually way too nice, is great for some. For me, it just wasn't the right fit. And so quickly there, I knew I was going to transfer over to back east, or back somewhere else. And I applied to Boston University. I got in. I finished out my last 3 years there. Obviously, there was COVID and everything, but I started my podcast at UC Santa Barbara. And from there, it was really like, I haven't really looked back. It's been quite a journey. I don't think I get enough moments to think about it. It's times like this, or on interviews like these or podcasts that I get to, really reflect on how we got here. But it's been I'm grateful for Santa Barbara because it led me to where I am, but at the same time it was also like a very hard time for me. I think mentally easily one of the hardest. I'm usually very social and or more social, and there I was antisocial. I knew that once I was going to leave, I, you know, that I didn't need to talk to anybody. I didn't need to be friends with anybody. And not that I think that's the right way to approach it. That just was my approach. At the time I was also with somebody that was in New York. So, I was very tied to New York still. And I don't think I just didn't do a good job of acclimating to California or UC Santa Barbara at all. So I knew I was going to leave. And, the last 6, 7 months there were hard because there was a lot of like lonely moments. But that's where the podcast came from. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and i uh I was like, fuck it, I can do this. Like, I want to talk to the same people that all these podcasters that I'm listening to are talking to and learning from and having relationships with and stuff like that. And so I really went out and did it on my own. And fast forward 4 years to today, every single professional relationship. Now literally my girlfriend I met on my show was a guest of mine. Like everything in my life in some way, shape, or form. Lynx, all four of my advisors are former guests on my show. So like really every single aspect of the podcast has helped me in all facets of my life.
I want to double click on the connections you've made from your podcast here in a bit, but one of the things I also wanted to dive into further is, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. You mentioned your boredom and loneliness while you're out at school in California. Walk me through a little bit further the moment of, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. I can do what these people are doing, interview the same type of people. Did you go and buy a mic? Did you order something on Amazon? What was the mechanics of that like for getting that started? Did you just open your laptop and
Yeah,
press go?
no, it's funny. I haven't. Thanks for asking that because I haven't thought about that in a while. I think I just started listening to a lot of podcasts on my way to class, and then actually I remember this is funny. There was like some kind of weird kid on my floor who would like ask to get dinner in a very nice way. I don't want to sound condescending, but I was just so mentally in a place where I was like, fuck everyone. Like I don't want to talk to anybody. You're kind of strange. Yeah, this, that, right? Like kind of like negative mentality. And I would just instead of going to dinner with anybody, I would listen to podcasts. So it was like kind of and it was in a time too where like obviously there was a lot of them out there, but like it wasn't maybe as obviously as many as there are today. And I was listening to a lot of Rogan and a lot of Andrew Schultz and people like that, and I was thoroughly entertained, like and from Rogan specifically, like obviously, people want to give him flack, whatever, but like he's had some of the coolest people you can think of. He's had people that trek the Arctic that are reversing aging, like actually I had him on my show as well. Like there's a lot of like really cool people, and so I was like, oh, okay, like this is cool. And I realized how much I was learning from the conversations. I realized that right when like Rogan would ask a question, maybe like a second before I'd be wondering the same thing, or like at the same time I'd be wondering or have that question. I was like, I know Rogan's the GOAT and no one's ever gonna get close to him probably, but I was like, man, like this would be a lot of fun to try out, and like I'd love to sit and talk to the people that he is. Obviously he's Joe Rogan, but so he was definitely a big motivation, especially or inspiration at that time. And then I think, I always felt comfortable speaking to people, so I was like, okay, this is definitely down my alley. And so instead of going the buying the mic route and all that, which thank God I didn't do, looking back on it now, I found it's like it was really a musical recording studio in UC Santa Barbara called Hidden City Studios. Shout out to Elliot Lanham and Hidden City Studios, which at the time I think was brand new. And now he's been crushing. He works with, I mean, he's works with all these cool people, records podcasts with like Rob Lowe and whatever. But at the time, he didn't have a podcast studio open. It was literally like just a recording studio for musicians. And I was like, hey, can we do podcasts here? And he was like, yeah, of course, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just two mics and whatever. There was no video, and so I was like, all right, this is gonna be my studio. I'm like, all right, so now what do I do? And I actually, in terms of guests, there was my dad's friend who's like the leading expert on Claude Monet, the painter in the world. And so I'm like, and I loved him. He's like a great guy, Paul Tucker. And and I said, hey Paul, like, you know, his family friend, he's like 70 years old, hilarious guy. And I'm like, hey, like I'm starting this podcast thing, like want to be my first guest because he's also a local in Santa Barbara. He's like, yeah, of course. And we went to the studio and that was awesome. And I had really such a good time. And then from there on, I did some virtual interviews more on the phone. Or sorry, my second one was like a phone call interview. I didn't even know how to like hook up anything. I just had the guy at Hidden City do it for me. And then I remember I traveled down to uh, where was it, Anaheim, to meet Eric Anders, who's a UFC fighter, and he was my first like real in-person video interview and my first UFC fighter, which for me at the time, like I was watching UFC every week and I was so excited to be able to meet one and somebody that was really good, and he also played football at Alabama, so I was very excited about that. And then from there, once I transferred to Boston and I was closer to New York, and in between the transfer, I was in New York for that summer, I really went balls to the wall with it, and I started to get my process down. I started to better understand how this was going to work, how I was going to do this every single week. And you know, fast forward later, now I've been grateful to have over 150 hours plus of doing my show. I also have co-hosted in the past for former Mafia show, so we talk about that in a second. And so, you know, I have now combined with both, I have like maybe like 300 or 400 hours of hosting under my belt. Opened up my studio in Brooklyn. Now I'm renting it out and doing some consulting for podcasts on the side, in addition to the other things I'm doing. So this whole podcasting thing, you know, is it's been so funny because I think like in a lot of ways, like when I say the word podcast, like I'm kind of sick of saying it, but I have to say it's a lot of fun. It's great. I can't say anything other than that.
Oh man, yeah, appreciate you walking us through that because yeah, it's cool to think through the early days of it, and you've got a lot more reps under your belt than I do, but it's still fun to
How
share
many
those
episodes
experiences.
in are you?
So I've recorded, I think this is recording number 62. I've got
Nice.
40 something out now. So
Cool.
yeah, it's been good. I've
It's
kind of ramped it up.
it's reps, you know.
Yeah,
It's like going to the gym, to be honest.
spot on. Well, I was gonna say that, and also I feel like, you know, in pandemic times, the gyms were closed. You had to work out at home. I love my home podcasting setup, but there's something to be said about my in-person interviews. I feel like are my best ones
Yep.
because
Yep.
just the mechanical delay of, you know, video calls, microphone issues, whatever it might be. There's just something to be said about, and then also just the natural human connection with somebody. There's something to be said about
For sure.
in-person interviews, which I feel like that probably leans well for you being in LA when you started and then being in New York now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I couldn't agree with you 1,000%. You know, like obviously sometimes it doesn't permit it, right? Like now, or you know, I've had 20, 30 Zoom interviews as well, and I'm not completely anti doing them. But yes, in person is always better. That's why I wanted to also build up my studio in a space that I loved. I used to record at a different spot in New York or in Brooklyn, and I loved the owner there, and I still love that you know the I still love the owner and I still love the place. But you know, it was cool to have an opportunity to create my own space and customize it the way I wanted, and to bring people in person to that place. And you know, it's cool. It's a cool spot. So I agree. Obviously, it's always better to do in person for all the reasons you just listed. But you know, it's life. Can't always happen that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'll be sure to link your Instagram in the show notes here, but I love your behind the scenes footage you've been doing of your studio now, where they go up the stairs. I think it's a really cool way to, you know, really kind of immerse the audience into your podcast experience. So like I said, I'll be sure to link that in. One of the things I wanted to just double click on that you mentioned, and then I'd love to hear more about, the connection with the Mafia co-hosted show. But being out in LA, you had that exposure to just a whole swath of guests that just aren't available for, somebody that might be in a more remote location. Being in DC, I feel very lucky because there's a whole other network here that isn't available out there. But that said, one of the things you mentioned about interviewing people that were interesting to you, I go back and forth in my head a lot, or I did at least, around, I feel like some of the podcasts that were able to blow up and be super successful super quickly. And again, success is a relative term, but say that they were able to, gain some notoriety quickly, were ones that got really specific really quickly in a particular niche. And there are a ton of podcasts that do that. What I love about Joe Rogan, for example, and, to your point earlier, people have many perspectives and thoughts on him, but what I love about his, guests and interviews that he does is he just talks to people that he finds interesting. And I think that you've done a great job with that as well, just pulling in guests that you want to have a conversation with.
Yeah, I mean, that it's really my cardinal rule. Like, if I'm not genuinely interested, it doesn't mean that they're not interesting. It's just more like what I'm interested in. Then I try to not do it, because then I'm not going to be, I'm bad at faking it. I'm bad at being, uh, disingenuine. And I think that, like, my questions and my energy is not good when I'm not interested in something. So I really try to lean into that. I think too, I think you're right. Like, there's a trade-off when you go more niche. I think it might be quicker in terms of growth or, numbers and whatnot. I think for me, like, I'm very happy that I did the way that I chose, or I'm still choosing to do, because it's from a hitman to the mayor of New York to an aging doctor to or aging biologist to comedians to busker on the subway. Like, there's so many different uh people that I've been able to talk to, and I think if I had narrowed it down too early, it would have eliminated a lot of these people and a lot of these relationships. So I I see the argument for why people, when they start, they go a little bit more niche, and I get it. But for me, like, I am where I am, and I'm happy with that choice.
Now, where's this going? What was the, genesis of that name?
It's funny because, like, I almost sometimes I'm like, I hate this name, actually, like, very frequently. But then also I'm like, it is what it is. I'm not changing it. The origin is really just kind of both. And funny, I put it, where's this going, without a punctuation mark or a question mark, because I thought I was like, I thought at the time that I was like super smart and like, oh, like, where is this going? Not sure, but also I kind of know, so I'm not going to put the question mark, like, as it's more of a statement. Something stupid like that was my reasoning at the time. Um, but really, like, the premise is more that, like, you don't know where a conversation goes. You really don't know where anything goes, to be honest. And I have to say, even though the name sometimes sounds silly to me, I was kind of right. Like, I didn't know where the show was going to go. I didn't know where my conversations were going to go. I didn't know where my relationships with my guests were going to go. I didn't even know where I was going to go with this whole thing. So, it's kind of fun. It's diving into the unknown with all of the above, and that's definitely that's the origin story of that.
Diving into the unknown seems to be a recurring theme for a lot of my guests that are doing what they love to do. And there's so much to be said about that. And to that end, I mean, like you said, you were even able to meet your girlfriend from it. I'd love to learn more about that story as well. How did that come about?
She was a guest on my show, like any other guest. And it's funny because there's definitely misconceptions on the internet of what happened and didn't happen. The truth is I had her friend on my show, another TikToker named Talia Lickstein, who on the show was like, you should have my friend Serena Kerrigan on. I'm like, sure. Don't know who she is, but we'll look into it and definitely check it out. And Serena has an amazing brand. I checked it out after. I'm like, oh yeah, this seems cool. Like, New Yorker. Really love the energy just from the small pieces of content that I saw. And I reached out to Talia. I'm like, hey, can you set it up or put me in touch? And she never answered. So I'm like, whatever. I didn't think about it honestly until like 4 months later, where then Serena came up on my feed, and I was like, oh, I think this is that girl that I was supposed to connect with. Like, I'll just DM her. I've done this 100 times in terms of DMing somebody to be a guest on my show. And she's like, yeah, set up with PR. Great. Not like nothing. I really thought of nothing crazy. In my prep, I knew that when I was listening to her interviews, like it was going to be a fun time, that's for sure. And then, as you mentioned, like I greet my guests outside, and so we literally have our first hug ever on camera. And then she came on, and like that's literally the first time I met her. And then very quickly, she uh, famously said, because it went pretty viral, "Are you hitting on me? I'm down." And I was like, "Serena, let's keep this professional," and which I meant, because like I did not. I feel like that's how people get canceled. And so, it was funny because too we could feel the energy, but obviously I didn't want to act on this, and she's my guest at the end of the day. Like I am a professional more than I am anything else, and I'm not going to risk it all to be an idiot on a podcast and try to hit on, like, there's so many wrongful dynamics there. If something were to happen after, it's like, okay, you can take care of it after, and whatever, figure that out after. But like, let's focus on this hour-long episode. And my rule too is like I would never have reached out or like made a first move, if you will. Um, and so she had texted me a couple hours later. She's like, "I had a great time today. Like, like, thank you so much." Right. And I said, "Likewise, but let's continue it." I was like, "Likewise, but far too short. Let's continue at dinner sometime," or something like that. And, very, very, it was obvious that we were going to see each other after. So I felt comfortable saying that. And then she was like, "I would love that." And then here we are. So it's been really it's an amazing story in and of itself, I think. Extremely unexpected, I'll tell you that. She's the best. We have such an amazing relationship, and we have so much in common. We both are New Yorkers, both only children of divorced parents that are foreign. Like there's so many similarities in upbringing and differences as well. And but yeah, once again, it all kind of stemmed from this podcast, and despite what most people think, I did not have intentions of hitting on her when I invited her on. That I promise you. So people could believe what they believe, but that's the truth.
It's to your point, the question mark might have been needed at the start, that you probably didn't expect to meet your girlfriend when starting off your podcast
No,
out in
when I
California.
first started this podcast, I'm not like, oh, this is gonna lead me to my girlfriend. No, but God bless. I'm very happy that it did.
Do you know of any other podcasters and guests, or two guests at the same time, or any other situations like that? I feel like it was probably like a more common thing back in the
That's a great
night
question.
show or morning show types, like on cable television. That was probably more regular when you had the green room and the prep and all that stuff. But I feel like in
That's a
podcasting, that's
great
probably not that
question.
common.
I don't know if I've ever heard of a guest and a host falling in love after a podcast like that, and that being the first time they ever met too. Like I know obviously
Yeah.
a lot of couples do shows together and they host shows together, but that's a really good point. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that in the history of podcasts that it's bound to have happened. But it's probably we're in the very, very, very slim few.
We'll crowdsource it. And to your point about other couples doing podcasts together, is that something you guys have thought about?
No. I mean, like she came on my show, then she has an amazing platform called SFK TV because her brand is SFK. Um, Serena fucking Kerrigan. So she created this platform, and I went on it, and we did like an amazing hour and a half long sit down, and we kind of like debunked what really happened. So that was like our first, call it, public speaking together after we started dating. Would we ever do a podcast together? I mean, I would never say no to that. I think it would be fun. I don't know. I think right now we're so busy with other things too, that it's very doubtful we do that anytime soon. But if it happens, I mean, I never say never. That's for sure. And I think there's crazier things that we will have done. You know.
Yeah, you don't, like you said, you don't know where this is going, and so to that end, let's talk about your podcasting journey further. And obviously, like we talked about, you talk to people that you find interesting. Where did your interest and fascination towards mafia mob bosses come, and how did those relationships really come to be in today's day and age?
Yeah. So I first had seen Michael Franzese, who's obviously one of the big mob figures on YouTube and content space. And I'd reached out, and I thought that he was so well spoken, and I really was fascinated by his story. Again, I started the show with the idea that like I want to talk to people that are not like me. So he was a great candidate for that. And so I reached out to his team and they scheduled it. And I remember this was one of those cool first moments too, where I flew out a week before my school in Boston. Sorry, flew out before the first day of second semester at BU, and I went to LA or Orange County, and I rented out this like sweet hotel room. I brought in a little production crew, two-person crew, and I was like, this is a really once in a lifetime opportunity. And it was actually, I believe it was like end of January 2020, and I did the whole thing, and I was there for a couple days, and it was just really cool. I prepared hard, and Michael was so gracious, and he met me at this the Fashion Island Hotel, which is where I was staying, and everything just went so smoothly, and I was like, man, this is so cool. Here I am. I'm 19 years old, right before my 20th birthday. Like I'm interviewing a former mob boss. Like this is peak cool. And then I came back, and I remember that same week, by pure coincidence, and I think it was because I was down the mafia rabbit hole, I had watched and reached out to John A. Light's agent, who's another big figure in the space. And so I think I went like Michael on Monday or something, and John was on Friday, or vice versa. I don't remember. And anywho, I had like flown halfway across the country, interviewed one mob boss. Then I was back home in New York, and I'd interviewed another hitman in the same week. I'm like, I don't know where this is going. And so, but it was cool. And then COVID happened. And my interview with Michael did really well, by my standards at that point, still today. And then John started his show, and he was like, "Hey, I would love to have you co-host, or host. I think you're a great host." And so we did that. And it was just it was such a fast it would I think people misunderstand, like they misunderstand him, and I think they also misunderstand my role. Like I was into it because I really liked hosting. I like talking to people. I like learning, and um, I'm fascinated by people that are, as I said, unlike me. So, the mob stuff was really the perfect mixture of all those things. And it was a great opportunity for me. It was great exposure at the time. Obviously, it's a more risky category, but that was before like the mafia category went crazy, which now it's a very popular category on YouTube. And so, we really grew that show to really big places. And uh, we still have been doing it, a little bit less consistently. So we'll see where it goes. I think, at this point we kind of did what we needed to do in the space. And I'm busy with a lot of other things now too, and so is John. So, if one day we don't do it, like that's okay. I think there will be a time where we don't. But we've obviously uh grown very close, and even though there's things that I disagree with him about, and I think that, there's obviously things that he did that are really horrible, and he did his time for those things. It's a very interesting human psychology where, this is somebody who was very dangerous in his past, but now I've gotten to know the other side of him, which is coming back from that, and coming back from jail, and seeing seeing his effects on his family, and having a lot of regrets around that, and now he really has changed his life. So, it's definitely a very interesting life for me to look at from afar, and also, as somebody that knows him far removed from the life that he lived before. But it's been definitely an unbelievable experience. It's something that I'll be able to tell my kids one day, like, Dad, when he was 19, was interviewing hitmen in the mafia. Like, it's a crazy, crazy thing when you really think about it. So, but an amazing experience, because I knew it was also something like, this is a dying breed of person. The mafia is dead. And I think it'll never be what it was back in the 80s and 90s. So for me to at least been able to be around an interesting part of history, and New York history too, and Brooklyn history too. I think were all reasons that I really was fascinated by it at some point.
Super cool, and hats off to you for sticking your neck out there, and again, like we said earlier, putting yourself on an uncomfortable position to have have a unique conversation with someone that a lot of other 24-year-olds haven't. So super interesting. And I'd love to maybe go one step further from a podcasting perspective. Are there any dream guests of yours? We talked about Rogan earlier, and I know a lot of folks would love to interview him, but any dream guests of yours or anyone in particular you'd love to get on that you just haven't been able to get in front of yet?
Andrew Schultz, number one. I keep calling him out. It's funny because him and I DM'd back in 2020 when he was not even a fraction of what he is today.
Yeah.
I just had, he went to UC Santa Barbara. I went to UC Santa Barbara. He grew up in New York. I grew up in New York. Um, I think that what he's doing, I think he changed the game at every level of what short form content is, what clips is, what marketing on your Instagram is, which now every single person with any kind of content platform is doing. And I think that he really is to be credited with that. But I know I will. I know I will one day. His studio's near mine. Like from what I hear, I think it's in Brooklyn or somewhere in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn's big, but it's not that big. So I definitely would love to get him on one day. I think we'd have an absolute blast. I think he would get a kick of my style, and I know I would push him in the right ways. Other than Schultz, Barack Obama, which honestly it should be in that reverse order. Whether you agree with his politics or not, I think that you're talking about a very decent human being and a very, very interesting person. So I would love to have the opportunity to interview him. Conversely, I'd love to interview Trump, to be honest. I think for me, I'm all about who's interesting, right? And again, agree or disagree with whatever they say, believe, do. That's fine. We can all agree or disagree on that. But I'm interested by just pure interesting characters. So he would definitely be there. Um, I'd love to sit down. I'd love to sit down with a Rafael Nadal or a Roger Federer as a tennis guy. Those
Yeah.
are and Djokovic. I mean, those are people that I've always looked up to growing up. On a business perspective, I'd love to sit down with a Bill Gates, or I'd love to sit down with some of these, icons and or Warren Buffett. I'd love to. I mean, people that are one of one is really to put it that way. So, Schultz, I love how I started with Schultz and then went to Obama. He'll be flattered about that. But yeah, I'd say I want to go after the big dogs and get some of those.
I love it, man. Yeah. Well, I'll make a clip of this, and when Schultz hears that you put him in front of Obama, hopefully that'll
Here,
spur it.
let me help you out. Let me help you out. Schultz, it's time for you to come on my show. 2020, we were DMing. You said one day I'll be on it, and I think it's time, man. You're in Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn. Let's make it happen.
We don't know where this is going, but I'm excited to see Schultz on it.
100%.
Look,
We'll see you soon, Schultz.
I'm seeing him on Friday, so if I bump into him in the streets of DC, I'll be sure to push it too.
Oh, nice. You're going to I mean, dude, he's selling out arenas like it's nobody's business.
I'm really excited. I mean, to your point, he's just built different, and it's really showing over the last couple of years, and it's
It's
freight train. Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. So as we're out of the podcast talk here, I want to, you mentioned your advisors for Lynx all came from as guests for your show. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, how the idea for Lynx started coming to be, and then, learn a little bit more about what that platform looks like today and where it's going.
Yeah, so I like how you said where it's at today, because the truth is that it's iterated. Like many people in tech that you probably have either talked to or heard about. Uh, and I think I felt weird about this in the beginning, but it started as something and now it's molded into something else. It first started because when I first came back to New York from school, it was about almost 2 years ago, year and a half. I realized that I was quite lonely in a way. I came back to the place that I grew up. A lot of my friends were here. A lot of young people were here. I was single at the time, and I was like, man, where are the young people, and why am I not? Why do I know that there's 200,000 of people that are living here, but I can't seem to find a single one? And I was living at the time with my best friend Joe, and him and I love to go out and meet people together. And we're not like crazy partiers, but we just like to meet new people. And if it was going to be girls in a setting, I think it's nice to go into some of those social settings with your best friend by your side. And so it really started off as a group matchmaking tool on how we connect different groups of friends on a night out in a more organic way, kind of anti-dating app, anti one-on-one. Even though I'm a fan of dating, and at the time I was a fan of dating, there's just an alternative to meeting new people in a more casual way. And then it became a little bit more serious a year ago, and then we really started building about 9 months ago towards that. And in a lot of conversations with people, and then also venues, specifically hospitality, F&B, cocktail bars, you name it, you realize that, and this is obviously consistent around the world and in every city, but Thursday, Friday, Saturday is where these businesses make their money, right? And you have basically 3 or 4 days out of the week that are very, very slow. And so now it's really molded into how can we help those businesses increase revenues on slow days, right? And at the same time, so some of those ways are obviously going to be promotional discounts, right? And the funny part is, like, those already exist, but the issue is that there's very weak outreach from those businesses to potential customers or foot traffic themselves. Like, I don't follow these a nice cocktail bars Instagram, watch their story at Tuesday at 4 o'clock for my 6 p.m. happy hour. Like, the conversion there is very low. And so what we're trying to do is streamline traffic directly from businesses to consumers in an engaging way, and offer those discounts, which is obviously a massive incentive, especially when you see that, cost of living is at all-time highs, especially in New York for young people. It's borderline impossible to live here if you're not making close to six figures. Our mantra is really how to make going out in New York affordable, how to make it enjoyable, how to be able to explore the best venues and the best places in New York City in an affordable manner. And then also, we've been throwing some activation events with some of our venues to get people coming out. We had a really cool event the other day at the Skylark in New York City, which was, usually I think their martinis are $20, but they were $10 martinis, so like half price on a martini, any kind. And we had 150 people show up, and mingling and meeting new people in a casual way, like we were originally intended. And then at the same time, being able to like literally go to one of the best venues in New York City and get really cheap drinks, right? So like that's really where we're at right now. And it's definitely been a challenge. Not that I'm surprised by that, but there's a lot of surprises along the way on what it's like to build out a tech platform, what it's like to pivot, what it's like to fail, and you want to kind of fail hard and fail quick. And I know people say that, but experiencing it is very different too. So now we're at the place where we've built out a V1 of our product that I think is ready for friends and family and people close to us. Continuing to throw these activation events, continuing to work on our product, continuing to work with venues, and molding those relationships. And then eventually, eventually more like ASAP, we're trying to raise money for it. That's really one of my Q1 goals. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, if we raise, it's that doesn't mean that we're done. If anything, that means we're just getting started. But for us, that would be a lovely milestone, because I think we're hitting that point where we can really use money to scale rather quickly. So that's exciting, but again, it's hard. It's hard doing something with zero resources. It's hard continuing to motivate people after a year. And I have a great team and people that I really believe in, and that I believe in me. So now it's just about convincing the outside world, and also not really less about just convincing the outside world, but also like how can we prove that this product belongs in the market, and how can we take that market, and I really believe that we're there, and I think that it's a scalable model. I think that everybody feels the pain point of cost of living right now. I feel like I can't go out in New York, out in New York City, without spending $100 every single time I take a deep breath, a breath of fresh air. So, if I can help some people in that regard, if I can make some organic connections. We had at our first event, we had two really cool stories. Um, Two guys that were in different friend groups met there, and then they actually started talking, stayed in touch, and then now they become business partners on their own venture, which is cool. And then I think we had a couple of dates come from people that mingled at some of our events. So again, that's only two events. Like, I'm really excited about to see what comes from the next ones, and continuing to mold those relationships with those venues. So on the venue side, if you're looking to increase revenue And again, that just means in a marginal way, right? But if you can increase revenue by 10% on slow periods over the course of a year, that makes a very big difference for a small business. And conversely, for the consumer, if we can help you save some money and help you explore some upscale places and bars and experiences at a more affordable rate, like, God bless.
I love it, man. I'm excited to see it grow. I'm excited to promote V1 when it's ready to launch. Is it out now, or is it coming out soon?
No, so it's not available to the public right now. What you can do though, if you're listening to this, is go to lynxtonight.app. That's LYNX tonight.app. It's also in the link in my Instagram bio. It's our wait list. We're about to actually update it. So if you're a small business in the hospitality space, F&B in New York City, and you're interested in tapping into some foot traffic, especially in the beginning, we're gonna be doing this for free for all of our businesses. I highly recommend checking that out. Sign up to the wait list, and then also very shortly we're gonna have a wait list for the business side and also for the consumer side. And the individual user side, I mean. So if you're interested in this, if you're based in New York, get on. If you're not based in New York as well, I really would love for you to join. It takes about 20 seconds, and the goal is once we raise and really have a scalable product, to come to every major and non-major city in the United States, and hopefully one day the world. So that's really what we want to be building.
I'm fired up, man. I'm fired up. I'll be sure to plug
Yeah.
all of that in the show notes. Whenever you're ready to launch in DC, I've got the perfect connection for you. I just had a guy, Scott Parker, on. Scott, you're a legend if you're listening to this, but he owns 26 F&B locations in the DC area, and he's
Oh
just tapped into the space. So whenever you're
man,
ready, just let me know.
dude, I will. That will be one of my first calls when I come. Probably the first call when I come to DC.
Please do, man. Please do. And then my
I
last
appreciate
question for
that.
you, just as we 100%, just as we round out here, I'm curious. You got your podcast, you've got this business you're getting up and running. You talked to Pomp recently. You asked him what the question young entrepreneurs ask him all the time, and he said for money. You're going through the fundraising process, which is not easy at all. You're
No,
also in a serious relationship. How are you balancing your time? And we talked about self growth earlier. You're trying to read. You're trying to focus on wellness and health. How are you managing your time? Is it a physical calendar? Is it a calendar on your phone? Time management software? What are you doing to
you know,
balance and stay sane these days?
I don't think I'm ever really gonna. We were talking about it really early on. I don't think I'm ever gonna really achieve balance, and I don't think I really want it, to be honest. Um, Eventually there's going to come a time, when I have kids and I'm going to have to. But these are the times to take massive risks. I've taken risks and failed. There are things that even in the last 2-3 years that I would have really like to have done differently, that put me in some tricky situations where I'm like, man, I feel like that wasn't a good decision. At the time, it felt like a brilliant decision. But I think this is the time, even if some moments right now feel very stressful, I know I'm going to look back on this in a few years and be very grateful that I put myself through it. Maybe not always to the extent that I am, but, this, if not at 23 or 24, it's definitely not going to happen at 45 or 50 when I have a whole family. Not to say that I won't take risks and go after my dreams then. It'll just look different in terms of, like, the priorities change when you have kids and a family. Um, what even was your question? Did I even answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I asked if you're using. I mean, more of like from a day to day
Oh, I
perspective. How are you keeping
remember.
track of
Yes.
everything you're
So
doing?
so so actually what I did yesterday, I was on the flight home. We've been traveling the last 10 days, and I made a very, very, like, more than I've ever done, a succinct to-do list broken down by all my different ventures, and then like things that are more daily that I need to be doing daily. And then also like things that I just that are on my checklist. I keep a very organized calendar, because then I forget things. That's why I'm always about the calendar invite. If it's not, me and my girlfriend always joke, if it's not on the calendar invite, it doesn't exist. So I think that's really important. I think when you're busy, and you relate to this, I'm sure, and a lot of people listening, it's like when you're busy, you have to be organized, and if you're not organized, it really fucks up everything. Your preparation's off. You're start worrying about things that you shouldn't be worried about. So I really try to stay as organized as possible, and in terms of balance too, like, I have a lot of friends of mine that honestly, like, I feel like I haven't seen in a while, which, is definitely on me. And I think a lot of them also understand that I'm in the process, especially of like really trying to grind out some things that are really hard to do, and that require a lot of time and energy and effort. So, one thing I really want to do in the new year is make sure that my friends know that I love them and and find the time to spend time with them. But it's hard sometimes to manage all these things at once.
Couldn't agree and resonate. Could agree more and resonate with you a bunch there. If anyone's still listening, text one of your friends you haven't talked to in a while and tell them you miss them and you love them. Felix, really appreciative of your time, man. It was great chopping it up with you, and excited to stay in touch. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you, to follow you, and to keep up to date with all of your amazing ventures?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it, and for sure we'll keep in touch, and excited to learn more about you as well, on a personal level. Um, for me, where you can stay in touch is definitely follow me on Instagram at felix.levine. That's my most important social media account. I'm just trying to be more consistent in the new year with my YouTube channel on YouTube Shorts. I post all my video versions of my episodes there, so you can find all that over there. TikTok, Felix Levine, Apple and Spotify. Subscribe there, and so you get notified every single time a podcast drops. That's really it. If people are in the New York City area, this is another thing that I've kind of touched on. If you're in the New York City area and you want to start a podcast, or you want some of my guidance and some of need a little bit of consulting to get you there. I'm doing it in a very affordable way for a lot of clients. I built out a little team that record at my studio. You get one-on-ones with me, and I promise you it's literally cheaper than anywhere else in the city and the best top-tier equipment. So if you're in the DC, New York area, hit me up. Or if you just need podcast consulting in general and you're elsewhere as well, I love talking about my journey, if you will. Like I think that there's a lot of mistakes that people make, and a lot of people want to get into this world, and I'm here to save time. And time is money at the end of the day. So yeah, so that's my end plug. And then of course Lynx, if you're not on the wait list, I would love for you to take 20 seconds, literally 20 seconds, subscribe, join that wait list, and I promise you it'll be worth it. It'll be something that hopefully one day will save you time. Hopefully you'll be able to meet new people, and will be an added value into your life. So definitely check that out.
Tap in, guys. Felix, appreciate you, man. I'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.